these 4 psychological approaches that we have to money. Some people approach it with a lot of anxiety. Some people approach it with avoidance. But then there's a particular approach. It's called vigilance or hypervigilance, really. Money hypervigilance, sort of anxiety in action. And that vigilance, which can sometimes cross into hypervigilance, happens when you are so hyper aware of exactly where everything is going, every dollar that's coming in, every dollar that's going out. You have it planned, you have it mapped. You've looked at it 6 ways from Tuesday. You know, it can be exhausting to try to keep that up forever.
This is the Brown Way to Money podcast, where women of color in business find their financial independence path. Because financial success is within our reach, but by playing by their rules, it is only going to take us halfway there. To succeed, we must take ownership of our voice with money. So, welcome to the Brown Way to Money podcast. But before we start, very quick, what an extra $500 will do for you or for your business this month? Well, maybe that is for payroll, to get that social media strategy, or to simply go and relax this month, take a massage, whatever it is. You could be the receiver of one of the micrograms we give here at the Brown Way to Money. If you want to have a chance to be the receiver of these micrograms, then pay attention to the secret word on this episode. And then go to brownwaytomoney.com and submit your application. Thank you for being here. And I'm just going to go right into this first burning question. So building financial independence requires a strong strategy, especially for entrepreneurs where income may be quote unquote unstable or for some of them unpredictable. So how, from your own story of being an entrepreneur, how have you been able to manage cash flow and still prioritize savings and investing?
That's a fantastic question. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm so happy to be here. So I really appreciate that you're having me on, and hello to all of your community, your listeners. To your question. So people often talk about the unpredictability or the volatility of income when you are an entrepreneur, when you're self-employed. It isn't the volatility or the unpredictability itself that's the problem. It is the gap between what you're earning and what you're spending. And so to illustrate that with I'm going to use an extreme example just to make the point. Let's say that your cost of living, your monthly expenses are, I don't know, $5,000 a month. And I know that some don't get hung up on the number. Some people are going to hear that and think, that's too low or that's too high.
Right.
Pick your number. Let's just say hypothetically it's $5,000 a month, right? If your income was volatile anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000 per month, who cares?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, your income is still volatile, right? Between $20,000 per month to $30,000 per month is like, that's a change of nearly. That's a dramatic change. And yet the fact that there is such volatility doesn't matter because the delta between even that lowest tier of your income versus your average monthly spending is just so big that you've got plenty of cushion. And so that is not only how I managed it, but how I teach my students and my audience to manage that volatility. What you're managing for is not to smooth out the volatility. You want volatility. Volatility is good. Volatility means that normally you make $20,000 a month, but then March came around and all of a sudden your income shot up to $55,000.
Right.
Wow. That's volatility. That's great. So you want the volatility. You just want to leave that gap.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned this because many people get fixated on, I'm not earning this amount of money, right? But when you see it from the perspective of what is your set cost, that is what you really need to have control over, that you have to know first. And then whatever the predictability, like how predictable your income is, will allow you to make a plan. But it really is like that, right? Sometimes you're launching programs and then your income, your cash flow goes in your income. And sometimes you just went on a summer vacation and didn't receive any clients. It really, go back to control what you can control as of perspective, and your expenses are the things that really, really matters. So from your own perspective, and I want to make a connection on something that really struck me when I saw you at FinCom, which was that you were with your parents. As as one of the goals that I have for my life. And I was with my mom there and my daughter, but I know that having family, for especially for women of color, where we are so close, having family is something important. How do you translate that into your financial goals and then into your business goals? How do you make all of those connections to make financial decisions?
I don't know if I ever, I think it would be different if my parents relied on me financially.
Mm-hmm.
My parents fortunately, they don't rely on me financially. And I know that for a lot of people that's not the case. A lot of people, their parents don't have they don't have adequate retirement funds.
Right.
Particularly people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, often even 20s, find themselves kind of sandwiched in between, like they need to support themselves. Maybe they need to support kids. They also have to support their aging parents. And then oftentimes you have to send remittances back to, your country of origin. And that can be a very difficult balancing act. So in my personal case, my parents, I want to make sure they're 83 years old. They're going to be turning 84 next year. So I want to make sure that I spend time with them.
Mm-hmm.
The time element is important because we don't have forever. But fortunately, they have never needed to rely on me to pay their bills or anything like that.
That realization was what got me into psychology of money, into understanding the emotional side of money, because at the age of 6, I was diagnosed with an immune system condition, and doctors told my parents, like, pretty much enjoy her because she's not going to be past 12. We just give a couple of years, right? So they really install within my mindset the thing that you just have one life to live it. And my financial independence, the way that I see financial independence is a 3-point ways, not only the number, but mentally free from that, from money, and emotionally free from money. And that comes from that very statement of we don't have much time here. And because I went through that since I was 6 years old, I've been living the fullest as I can, like as much as I can, because I understand that it is a gift to be here. And that pushed me to understand the deeper layers of money. So I think, again, it really, really, it was something so good to see you with your parents there, because I hinted that time element was in there and sharing these experiences. But it is so important, I think, for people to understand that money doesn't replace other resources like time, like energy, like creativity in a business, right? Mm-hmm. Because we need to be we need to use that creativity to really build our businesses. And I just want to close this question saying that the way that you phrase that there are people that need to be like, they're on a sandwich between providing for their families and their aging parents. What I want to say here, because I know many of you listeners are on that position, is that first, it's okay. You're going to be okay when you think about how to structure your finances to support them both. But second, that you don't have to do it alone. And if you're in that position, just reach out, because we can come up with a plan on how to do it.
Oh, speaking of coming up with a plan, I wanted to circle back to your earlier question about managing money when you're an entrepreneur or self-employed, or you have any type of volatile income.
Yes.
Because there is a plan that I often suggest to people in terms of how to handle that. And I guess, on the heels of what we were just talking about, I suppose you could apply this in both directions. Sometimes the volatility is on the income side. Sometimes, for everybody, the volatility is also on the expense side, right? Because we never know exactly what our expenses are going to be. And that's true whether you're supporting yourself or a family of 3 or sending money to extended family. Like, there's always going to be some degree of volatility. So when you have volatility, everyone, no matter who you are, has volatility on the spend side. And what's unique about being an entrepreneur or being self-employed is that you also have volatility on the income side as well. So you have volatility in both directions. And so how do you plan for that? And so my suggestion there is that when you look at the volatility on the income side, take a look over the last 24 months, assuming that you've been doing this for at least 2 years, or heck, at least 1 year, right? If you've been doing it for at least 1 year, take a look at the last 12 months. Take a look at what you made every single month, and then look at and not just what you collect, the money that actually entered your bank account, the actual cash in account, right? Not just the amount of invoicing that you did. Look at the lowest amount and ask yourself if you could peg the average month. Sometimes there's going to be volatility in expenses as well. But can you peg at a minimum the average month with your basic necessary bills, those fixed costs? Can you peg the fixed costs to the lowest income month? And if you can at a minimum do that, then that means that all of the excess that you make above that lowest amount is money that you can then put into a discretionary fund that you can pull from on months where your expenses trend higher.
I love it. I love it. And I think in accounting terms, this is the equilibrium point. This is something that knowing this information we do to your subconscious mind. When you know that even in your lowest month, you're able to cover your expenses and to continue to run your business, you immediately change the perspective that you're seeing your financial situation or your financial goals. So this is amazing. Thank you for mentioning, because it is a great tip that I use personally, and my team uses to plan ahead. We get like, what is this minimum? What can we do? What else? It's like our baseline. So I want to ask you, many entrepreneurs feel stuck in this reactive cycle that we are talking about, right? Having income, not having income, and juggling, responding to those, I would say, immediate financial pressures, right? Because they tend not to see the whole big picture. Is more focused on the month to month. Let's talk about a strategy that maybe you have used or you share with your audience that they can use to shift to a proactive approach that puts them in control of their financial future. It is time for Brown-Weight Unfiltered, where we take a moment to talk about the one thing with money, the one belief, the one conversation that you were too scared to talk about. But when you did, everything changed for the better. What was that for you?
So for me, I was really raised with an ethos of frugality, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have much money. We had enough, we were always secure, but we didn't have money to go like eat a Panera bread or something,
Right.
that's rich people stuff. We didn't like buy jeans from Abercrombie. That's rich people stuff, we were TJ Maxx through and through. And so I was always raised to clip coupons, to look for deals, to look for discounts, to, really in many ways center my life, my day-to-day decision-making around frugality. And I think both belief that was hard to let go of, as well as some certain conversations that were hard to have, was when I really began to embrace the idea that valuing your time is so much more important than valuing your money. We don't have forever. And sometimes the benefit of money is that it can buy us time. Right? And if I can spend an extra few bucks and save an hour, I mean, what is an hour worth? An hour is tremendously valuable, tremendously valuable. And so that is it. It's easy to think that in theory. It's hard to put it into practice. It's hard in the day-to-day of it when you're making decisions both large and small. But that, I think, is the single toughest but most worthwhile, both mental shift and set of conversations to have.
Yes, it is. When you realize that your time is so valuable that sometimes you cannot put a price tag on it.
Mm-hmm.
it is life-changing. My daughter is 9 months old and I spend full mornings with her. And there is no amount of money that you can pay me to get away, at least those first from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. to get away from that, because I see every single day how she's changing, the new things that she's doing. There is not a price tag that you can put on that. Let's talk about a strategy that maybe you have used or you share with your audience that they can use to shift to a proactive approach that puts them in control of that financial future.
There is, in psychology, there's a financial therapist by the name of Dr. Brad Klontz who talks about.
Love him.
Yeah, he's fantastic. On the Afford Anything podcast, we did a 3-part series interviewing him, 6 hours. But one of the many things that he talks about are these 4 kind of approaches that we have, psychological approaches that we have to money. Some people approach it with a lot of anxiety. Some people approach it with avoidance. But then there's a particular approach. It's called vigilance or hypervigilance, really. And that money hypervigilance, it's sort of a derivative of anxiety, but it's sort of anxiety in action. And that vigilance, which can sometimes cross into hypervigilance, happens when you are so hyper aware of exactly where everything is going, every dollar that's coming in, every dollar that's going out. You have it planned, you have it mapped. You've looked at it 6 ways from Tuesday. You know what's in the bank. You know what you expect to collect. You know what you expect to send out. You really it's like project management, but with your money, right? You really know the comings and the goings of every single dollar. And I think that if you start there, and it can be exhausting to try to keep that up forever.
Absolutely.
Right? But if you start there and really are hyper vigilant and sort of micromanagerial about your money, particularly in the beginning, in the early days when you're feeling broke or when you're feeling financially stressed, that level of vigilance can really give you, it's a tactic and it's a mindset, both.
Right.
And it can give you that sense of control, and it's a way to get out of being reactive, because you react when you're surprised by a bill, but you're proactive when you're anticipating all of the bills that are coming downstream.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So my following question will be, first of all, I love Dr. Brad Klontz. He was the one that I found first when I started to go in the path of trauma of money.
Yeah.
So because I see money as the emotional tool, I found The Psychology of Money. Great book. Everybody, if you want to read a book, just go ahead and read The Psychology of Money. You will understand a lot of the emotional side of it. But Dr. Brad, I found him through one of his funny videos back in 2000. When was that? 2017. He was sharing this trauma of money and these different approaches to money, and everything made so much sense. And what you said of start from one of these being really see where your money is going, like what is happening with your money. Start there, but don't stay there. And start by
start
having
there, but don't stay there. That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
It's a balance. How do you crack that balance? That is what many people is asking all the time, because it is a fine line in between saving money and being afraid of not saving enough, right? It's a fine balance between being super diligent on knowing and controlling your money and being afraid of letting go of that control. How do we get away from that fear and just being able to say we can start here, but we don't stay here? What do you think is the key for that?
You said something interesting. You talked about being afraid that you're not saving enough. And so I would respond with, enough for what? Because the point of saving isn't just to save, it's to save in anticipation of a goal. All saving is really deferred spending. Some spending you're deferring until you retire. Some spending you're deferring until you have a big medical bill, but all savings is just deferred spending. And so we start with the question, all right, what are we deferring? What is that deferred spending? What is it that we
Right.
ultimately are going to spend this money on? And the way that we do this, and we talk about this on my podcast a lot, is this concept called timelining your goals. And so when you timeline your goals, the approach is start with a list of every goal that you have. Just like get out a piece of paper, right? Draw two big vertical lines down that paper. So you've created 3 columns. All right. In one column, I want you to brainstorm every single goal. Don't filter yourself. Just go wild. What is every goal that you have? And it can be as small and immediate as my friend is getting married and I want to make sure that I have enough money to give them a nice gift for their wedding.
Right.
It can be as small and as immediate as that, or it can be as big as retirement, right? Or buying a car or anything else. So start with a list of all of those goals. That's one column. The next column, you write the intended timeline for each one of those goals. Your friend is getting married in April, so that's the timeline. Retirement, that there's more flexibility there. All right. There's a range of years that you've got. So you write down,
Right.
I want to retire somewhere in the range of age, we'll say 62 to 68 or something. Right. So that's the time. And then in that third column, you write the intended amount of money that you think you want for this particular goal. And then once you've gone through this for each goal, and once you've gone through this exercise, you divide the amount of money that you need by the amount of time in months or in years that you'll have to reach that goal. And what you quickly figure out, right, is that your goals, oftentimes, if you had to save enough money to reach every single one of those goals within the timeline that you specified, it would turn into more than you make, right?
Yeah.
What you quickly figure out going through this exercise is, whoa, that is way too much. And so then you start to modify, right? Then what you do is you take your shortest term goals and say, all right, for this basket of goals, how do I either reduce the amount or extend the timeline? And then for the longer term goals, you say, all right, what assumptions am I making around the returns that I'm going to get on every dollar that I save? And how do those change over the years? A dollar that I save and invest now is going to be different than what I save and invest 10 years from now, just depending on the level of risk that those assets are exposed to. So for the longer term goals, you go back and you really run a more robust, more sophisticated calculation and recheck all of the assumptions. You would do that for any goal that is, we'll say, 10 years or more. And for any goal that is 10 years, 9 years or less, then you modify either the amount or the timeline.
I think you have given a visual and practical way of understanding your motto or the name of your podcast. You can afford anything, but not all at the same time.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just financial planning, how you manage the resources that you have at the moment. And now when you are an entrepreneur, the added layer of that is that you also need to plan for your business. You need to plan as an investor on your business because you're investing money, you're investing time. You are like the employee and the investor. So you have to think about those goals in terms of your position of investor and owner of this business. But you also need to think about the correlation of your business and your personal life. How have you found, Paula, that for your financial planning, this plays out when you have to kind of like plan for your personal life, but also plan for your business and that intersection?
So I strongly recommend that every entrepreneur, even if you are self-employed, give your business a name.
Yes, please.
Even if nobody knows the name, right? Even let's say that you're self-employed and you serve clients on a one-on-one basis. Your clients might not even know the name of your company, but I think everyone should give their company a name. And here's why, is because you want to create the mentality that you are distinct from your company.
Yes.
And then what you want to do, how that mentality actually expresses itself in your checking account, in your bank account, is that you're going to open up a business bank account, a separate business bank account. And that is the bank account that belongs to, we'll use a company name of Purple Daisy Pot LLC, right? Purple Daisy Pot LLC is going to have its own business bank account. and that's going to be distinct from yours. And all of the money that the company makes is going to go there. And then all of the expenses that the company pays is going to come out of there. One of the many, many expenses that company pays is your salary. And your salary is something that you collect every 2 weeks, just like any other employee would demand. That's why when you're determining what your salary is going to be, take a look at the lowest amount that your company, think of it like if you were hiring somebody else, how would you know how much you could afford to pay them?
Exactly.
It's the same question. So you take a look at what your company has available to pay its employees after it pays all of its other operating expenses. And heck, if you really want to make it formal, write a job posting for your position, right?
I love it.
Do it. Write a job post. You can even go to AI. It doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. You can go to AI and have AI write a job posting for your position. And then you've got your own job posting and you can apply for your own job and then you can hire yourself and just go through that experience like you are an employee of that company. So I think where a lot of entrepreneurs get confused, especially beginning, early entrepreneurs, is that they will conflate themselves with the company. They don't see a difference. And I've noticed this, by the way, and here's where you really have to set some rigid boundaries. I've noticed this even in my friends, where oftentimes, this doesn't really happen anymore because now Afford Anything we have not a big team, but a relatively decent sized team, right? We have employees, we pay them health insurance, we pay them retirement benefits, we give them paid time off, and so because of that, we have an office. You can see it here. I'm sitting in a rented, like a WeWork office, that is it's not just me with a laptop anymore. Now we have actual desks, that belong to us, to the team. So these days I don't get it as much from my friends. But back in the early days, I would often say to my friends, this happened once, I'll give you an example. I remember saying to a friend of mine, I was living in Las Vegas and she had flown out to visit. And I said, I have to work on Monday. And she was like, what are you doing at work? And I said, I'm doing a photo shoot. And she was like, can I come? Can I participate? Can I be part of that? And no, because it's a company. It's a company thing.
It's my company, right?
But she pressured me and badgered me. And then she started bringing up old fights that we had from 5 years ago. And I eventually just caved and I gave in. And so we did this I paid a photographer. We did this whole photo shoot. He alternated between pictures of me that I was using for the website and for, marketing material, for pictures of me. It's YouTube thumbnails, things like that, right? He was alternating between taking those pictures of me that I was using for my company and then just taking pictures of her that she was getting to use for fun. And I thought about it afterwards and I'm like, what would let's imagine that I was the owner of the company, but I wasn't the face of the company, right?
Right.
And let's imagine that I had hired an employee who was the face of the company. And then I discovered that employee did that. I would immediately fire that employee. No questions asked. They would be fired on the spot, right? So that decision that I made to cave to my friend's pressure, I should have fired myself, I deserved it. But that's the kind of conflation that you often end up in, even when you yourself are really trying to hold to this mindset of there's a distinction between me, the employee, and me, the owner of the company. Your friends don't necessarily see it that way. Your family doesn't necessarily see it that way. The people who are in your personal life don't necessarily see it that way. And so they will sometimes pressure you because they don't get that distinction. And that's where in order to be firm to your boundaries, you really do have to just think of yourself as an employee.
Yes. And let me add something. They don't have to see the distinction. It is not their job to see the distinction. It's your job to have it, right? And here is where the psychological, the mental triggers and emotional triggers come in. It is not their responsibility to respect that boundary. It is yours to make them respect that boundary. It is yours to have the conversation. And it is something common. It may seem like this is something that just happened to you, Paula, but it's not. I had almost a similar experience with my friends, with my family, even when traveling as well. It's like, oh, you're traveling for fun. No, I am traveling on business work. If I were traveling for any other company, you wouldn't be asking me that. You're asking me that only because it's my business. So what I often say is, I'm asking you to respect what I'm saying because this is the context on what I'm saying. And that's when people starts to understand, but they don't really have to get it. Only you are the one who needs to get it, and the reasons why, because you have your big vision, because you understand what you're doing, why you have a business and what you want to create. All of those things are going to give you the confidence to stand behind of your boundaries. But it's so difficult. Like you say, sometimes we just like, okay, whatever, just, I don't want to deal with you anymore, kind of like a thing, right? And we just give in. Oh my goodness. This time has gone so fast, Paul, and you have given us already so much on strategic steps on what people can take towards financial independence. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here to share with us this.